Hello and welcome to episode 426 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan, as always, joined by Evan Silva. And today we have a very, very special guest. He's an old friend of the show. He loves to debate, and the fans have told us they want more arguments on the podcast. And therefore, we have the esteemed Sigmund Bloom from our friends at Football Guys. Sigmund, how's it going?
Good. I should have my law license up there behind me for this episode. Yes. You know, your counselor. No, it's great. Debate is important. And I think sometimes because of the flat nature, there's no affect when you're typing online. People's feelings can get hurt. But I remember Mike Clay and I would go sword and shield back in the day. And I think it's really important to familiarize yourself with the cases against your positions, because then you're going to be ready to act if you're wrong. And I've been saying a lot lately, it's just as important, more important maybe, to be the first one to realize you're wrong than to be right in fantasy football. And I kind of liken it to the tackle or guard that gives up the sack that causes the fumble is usually there to recover the fumble. So this is how we can recover our fumbles, is to have some vigorous debates. So if we're wrong, we're going to realize it pretty quickly and might be able to correct it before other people catch on.
The original man versus machine was definitely Sigmund Bloom versus Mike Clay on Twitter.
Death, taxes, and Mike Clay. That's a saying I just made up a couple of years ago. Death, taxes, and Mike Clay.
Exactly. Perfect. Okay, on today's show, as I said, we're going to embrace debate. We've identified a bunch of players that Evan and Sig disagree on in their rankings. I will preside as your humble judge. We'll let them battle it out. By the way, if you have a draft coming up, you are doing yourself a disservice if you're not armed with our draft kit. We are tracking every bit of news, injuries, role changes, and making changes to our rankings so that you are ready to roll. Also, this podcast is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. They have this ridiculous, absurd $2 million to first, $1 million to second fantasy tournament running right now. Best way to put your knowledge to use and the best way to get ready for your home league is to run these underdog drafts. Promo code ETR when you sign up will match your first deposit up to $100. All right, got a bunch of guys I want to get to here because you guys, I was looking through Evan's rankings and I was looking through Sigmund's rankings, and I was actually like kind of shocked at the gap in some. And we're talking 20, 30, 40 spot gaps on some guys that I think are not like flyer range, like actually mid-round or early round range. And so I want to get to as many as we can here today, boys. First one, Travis Etienne. Sigmund has Travis Etienne ranked 62nd overall. Evan has him ranked 34th overall. Now, I'll let Sig go first here because I do think Evan is more in line with the market. I've seen Travis Etienne go round 3 in some sharper formats. I think round 4 is more realistic for home leagues. At this ranking, Sig, you are getting absolutely zero Travis Etienne. So why don't you go ahead and start us off there?
Yeah, it's basically a do not draft recommendation. I think I'll sum it up this way because I want to get to as many players as we can. Every time we bet against James Robinson, we're wrong. And Travis Etienne's pass catching ability has been greatly exaggerated. He's not a natural at running routes. He's not a natural to where he's going to be woven into the passing game, especially because it's an already crowded passing game to begin with. So I just think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves by putting him as a lead back when the team themselves see James Robinson as the lead back.
Sure. And Evan, I think one thing that we can say is James Robinson's health appears to be getting more optimistic, at least. I mean, it looks like he's gonna be cleared for week 1. I don't know if he'll play week 1, but I've been kind of backing off round 3 Travis Etienne a little bit. Still like him certainly more than Sig, but the James Robinson stuff does seem real. Evan, your response to Sig's points on Travis Etienne?
Well, I think that the natural improvement of the offense from last year, and look, I know Travis Etienne didn't even play in the offense last year, but the natural improvement of the offense moving from Urban Meyer, the disaster that was Urban Meyer, even more of a disaster than I think even his biggest detractors would have predicted, to Doug Peterson, which adds just a big time layer of stability into the offense. I think that Travis Etienne is going to be a true featured back. I know exactly what Sig is talking about when he says every time that we bet against James Robinson, we end up wrong. But if you have bet against running backs coming off torn Achilles for the last, I don't know, as long as, in recent NFL memory, you would have been right almost every single time, with the potential exception of Deontay Foreman, who it took like 4 years for him to come back from his Achilles. I don't think that the pass catcher core is too crowded in Jacksonville because we're talking about Christian Kirk as their almost locked in wide receiver one. And I know that Sig is down on Christian Kirk, as we may be able to get to later in the show. What I'm doing here, Sig, is I'm betting on a Trevor Lawrence leap.
Mm-hmm.
I took out some MVP futures on Trevor Lawrence at 80-1. I think that he is, that Andrew Luck level talent. We had Waldman on the show last year, and he thought that, he was talking about how he thought that Trevor Lawrence could be a teammate elevator like Andrew Luck was when he entered the league. That didn't happen, I think, for contextual reasons. But I think that Trevor Lawrence can take a really, really big leap in year two. And I think that he's going to pull a lot of the members of the offense along with him. And at the forefront of that, to me, would be Travis Etienne, his college teammate, and a running back whose competition is a former undrafted free agent coming off torn Achilles, and Snoop Connor, who I like a little bit, but is still a day 3 long shot.
My thing here, Sig, that I want to ask you about is about the pass catching stuff. Because, I've seen multiple people say this, that Travis Etienne is not a natural pass catcher. He did catch 4 balls per game in college, 48 catches last year in 12 games for Clemson. Also, Sig, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the shower narrative, but are you aware that Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne played together and therefore have this bond in the passing game? So if you tell me that Travis Etienne is only going to catch 30 or 40 balls this year, I would back off him a lot. I think he can catch 40, 50 plus. But go ahead on that, Sig.
Yeah.
Last retort.
And I think that we have a lot of competing narratives for who's going to benefit the most in this Jacksonville pass offense. And I think optimism about Jacksonville in general is well warranted. And it's going to be something where we probably have to correct at least one player not being optimistic enough about them. But it's hard to know who that player is going to be because Zay Jones has had a great camp, because Christian Kirk, who's already mentioned, is getting this preponderance of targets when he's on the field. We know Marvin Jones is still probably the best red zone receiver. There's even some buzz about Evan Ingram and his involvement, the team reclaiming his career. As far as Etienne, and I think Jay Moyer, who does excellent, like a super objective breaks down. Just showed, and it was just one clip of a ball clanking off of Etienne's hands, but he doesn't have natural pass catching technique with his hands. He's not truly a route runner downfield. He's more of a dump off, screen pass, short range receiver. He's not there yet as a passing game weapon.
He's not Alvin Kamara.
Right. Maybe he may not even be Naeem Hines, or JD McKissick.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to give that one to Evan because Sig, A, didn't factor in the shower narrative, but B, talking about target competition. I mean, Marvin Jones, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, that's not target competition, Sig. Come on. Think about that.
That's fair. Well, take it up with Trent Baalke. All right.
All right. Let's go.
Well, if all these guys stink, then Trevor Lawrence is definitely not going to be making any kind of a leap, right?
Listen, Trevor Lawrence is going to be a talent elevator, I think, as we talked about, Evan. And the Travis Etienne and Christian Kirk stuff, which we can get to later, is for sure a bet on Trevor Lawrence's leap. Let's go to one more guy in kind of that same range that Sig is lower on than Evan. Terry McLaurin, Sigmund has 52nd overall. Evan, 31st overall on Terry McLaurin. I'll give Evan the floor first here. It looks like slightly ahead of market on Terry McLaurin. Evan, go ahead on that.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in Terry McLaurin as a player, and like in my Commanders team. It's the worst name. I hate saying it. Like it's horrible. Just the football team would have been. It was fine.
I like football team. We can stick with football team on the show. We'll stick with football team. I like football. All right,
the football team. If you look at the football team fantasy team preview, I pointed out that like you look at the historical quarterbacks with whom Terry McLaurin has played, and I'm no fan of Carson Wentz, like not at all. I think he's like a bottom 10 starter, definitely bottom 15 starter in the NFL, but he's still clearly the best quarterback of Terry McLaurin's career. I think that Terry McLaurin is a player that can win at all 3 levels. He can be a deep threat. He's a really good route runner. I have had some trepidation about him because Jahan Dotson, who I think is extremely undervalued by the fantasy community, I think it's the dynasty metrics based evaluation that is, he played 4 years in college and, he didn't break out until later. And I think that analysis is off when it comes to Jahan Dotson, because he's going to be on the field every single snap. He was the 16th pick in the draft. He was an absolute stud last year. That has worried me a little bit, because it sounds like Carson Wentz is showing a lot of chemistry already with Jahan Dotson. But I still think that, when it comes back to target competition, it's really weak beyond those guys. And I think that Carson Wentz, for all of his faults, and there are many, he is willing to throw the ball into tight windows, and Terry McLaurin can get open. So I think that when we combine those, like when Terry McLaurin is covered, Carson Wentz is still going to be willing to pull the trigger, and he's going to get open a lot too, which is going to make things easier on Carson Wentz. So that's where I am on Terry McLaurin, but I'm also open to being wrong here.
Sig, you also have, for the record, before you start here, you also have Jahan Dotson buried at 213th overall, and Terry McLaurin at 52nd overall. So sounds like Sig is just completely out on the football team wide receivers. Go ahead, Sig.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the football team. I see catastrophic plane running into the mountain possibilities here. And I think the buzz, the vibe around Carson Wentz is so negative. And I'm not even sure what the right over-under would be of when Sam Howell gets a chance to see what he can do in this offense. And as far as McLaurin as a fantasy football commodity, when I look at the other receivers in that range of the draft, and your miles may vary, but guys like Darnell Mooney, Gabriel Davis, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Marquise Brown, Michael Thomas, these are all receivers that just look a lot more attractive to me. And I like McLaurin. I think McLaurin, I was honestly disappointed for him when he re-signed in Washington, because I just think that he is going to be one of those players that will continue to say, remember Lee Evans, like what if he played in a situation to unlock his real abilities and he could stay healthy? We'll see. I love McLaurin, the player, but I actually think that Carson Wentz is going to be a story that leads to failure again.
Yeah. I think I'm going to give that one to Sig, mainly because I think that Dotson and McLaurin should be closer together in ADP. I would take Dotson higher, and I agree with Sig that I'd be passing on McLaurin on some of those other round 3, round 4, round 5 guys that I really like. DJ Moore, Michael Pittman, Amon-Ra, Juju, guys like that in that
range. For McLaurin, I have him in a really big tier, like wide receiver 11 through like 19.
Right.
I wouldn't mind just putting him at the back end of the tier, but that's where I have him right now. I have him toward the middle, I think, of that tier right now.
All right. Let's go to Michael Thomas. Here's one that Sig is higher on than Evan. Sig has Michael Thomas 45th overall, an aggressive ranking. Evan, a bit more conservative on Michael Thomas at 67th overall. I think Evan and I have talked about Michael Thomas a lot here. I'm curious on the perma bull case here that Sig seems to have on Michael Thomas. Go ahead, Sig.
It's pretty straightforward. I know that he has the hamstring injury, but I can't remember which Saints writer was saying, like, it's expected to be minor. But all of the reports have been he's Michael Thomas. He looks like Michael Thomas. And he himself pointed out something that I think we should take into account, that even when he was playing with the ankle injury that has now been surgically repaired finally correctly, he was playing with that ankle injury with Taysom Hill as a quarterback, and he put up like 9 for 100. So we could just all be overthinking this. I think that 2 or 3 weeks, and then Jameis Winston is not exactly a stranger to making wide receivers good fantasy values too.
Absolutely.
So, and they have a good offensive line. I mean, that's one of the things, like a good tiebreaker in fantasy football is offensive line continuity. Detroit comes to mind. Philadelphia comes to mind. Like, these are offenses that, when in doubt, just assume that things are going to go well or on the upper range of outcomes because of offensive line play. So it's pretty straightforward. If Michael Thomas was 80 or 90% of Michael Thomas, like what he was when he came back with the ankle injury, he would probably be worth the 45th pick. If he's what he was before, then everybody who took him is going to be laughing through September as long as he stays healthy.
God, I would love to debate this one, but Evan is the debater. I am the judge, so I'll give the floor to Evan because I'm actually out on Michael Thomas this year. But go ahead, Evan.
Well, that creates bias in terms of your judgment skills. Now, does it not?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And I honestly, I hate disagreeing with Sig on a lot of these because, I have so much respect for his opinions. And he always presents he's obviously thought through all this, probably more than even I have because he's a philosopher. But with Michael Thomas, and I think Nick Underhill would probably agree with you, Sig, because we had him on the show. Did you get to meet him when we were in New Orleans?
Didn't. I need to.
Yeah, you've got to. Oh, he's a great guy. But he's been very, very optimistic. I think, what was his prediction? Like 1,200 yards. Of course, beat writers are not always the best statistical prognosticators, and he admitted that. But I mean, based on what he's saying, he's absolutely been on the optimistic side. With that said, I mean, the ankle, and I'm not a doctor, obviously, but the ankle has been a problem for so long. And he just picked up a hamstring injury. That's a compensation injury, I would assume. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I would assume. And I get worried about the compilation of injuries starting to get a little bit older. The way that Jameis plays, he's so good throwing the ball on the perimeter. So I think that he's really going to riff with Chris Olave in particular. The Saints paid a ton for Chris Olave to go and get him. I'm like relatively in line with ADP, I think, right now on Michael Thomas. Every time that I'm in a draft, he's like sort of in the mix, right where I'm about to pick, usually like 5th, 6th round. I think it's probably 5th round now. So I mean, I don't know. I get the bull in the bear cases on Michael Thomas, but I guess I'm on the bear side right now.
No, come on. This is ridiculous, Sig. 29 years old, hasn't played in 2 years, loses the most accurate quarterback in the history of the NFL, increased target competition from Olave and Jarvis Landry. And we don't even know if he's fully healthy yet. Came into camp, a little bit banged up, now has the hamstring issue. And plus offensive efficiency. What about Sean Payton being gone? I'm not confident that this offense will run as smoothly as it has in the past when you have Jameis in and Sean Payton gone. So come on, this is an easy fade for me, Sid.
Yeah, and that's all fair. I think that there's that emotional side of fantasy football, and I understand the stance. Basically, forget the particulars. I'm not going to believe it until I see it again from Michael Thomas. That being said, the variable here that matters is Michael Thomas. All the auxiliary periphery stuff, if he really is Michael Thomas, then he's going to have that gravitational pull. He was the most valuable wide receiver in fantasy football the last time he was healthy. Mm-hmm. He may never be fully healthy again. And this is why these debates, I mean, there's tons of respect in this room. And we're talking about at the widest margin, like a 70-30, 60-40 kind of probability.
Absolutely.
So there's no victory laps. There's no sense of I was so smart, I figured that out. It's just, like I said, this is a great exercise for understanding how to identify. I compare it to the weather on a recent show. As a kid, I thought they said, I remember hearing like 32 or 33 different variables determine the weather. And really what we're arguing about is which variables are going to be operative, which variables are going to be predictive. For different players, different variables will be predictive. But I think for Michael Thomas, it's strictly his health and return to form.
Actually, you said we're not going to victory lap this. We're going to have to agree to disagree there. Steven, if you're listening to this, as soon as Michael Thomas has a bad game, clip my Michael Thomas take, and also clip Sig so we can make him look dumb. Okay. Let's go to a running back in kind of this round, late round 2, round 3 range, and James Conner. Sig is lower on James Conner than Evan. Sig has James Conner 41st overall, Evan 26th overall. Evan, I'll let you go first here on James Conner. We've talked plenty about James Conner being, I think I've been kind of okay with where he goes. Seems like you're a little bit above market now at 26 overall. Go ahead on James Conner.
I would say so. And he's another guy who always, when I'm in the third round range, like around mid third, like he's usually available for me. Sometimes I take him, sometimes I don't. But I think that James Conner is like really good. And I think that he showed that. I mean, you remember this guy, like he battled through cancer. He came back from cancer. When he really got the full opportunity last year, and he really didn't even get the full opportunity because Chase Edmonds was there, and Chase Edmonds, of course, is now gone. And we're talking about, people are trying to prop up Benjamin, who's been in the league for 2 years and couldn't get on the field. James Conner, I think that touchdown regression is going to hit him. He's not going to score 18 touchdowns again, but I think he could score 10 to 14. I think that the system there, they run a ton of plays in Arizona. They're gonna score points, and I think he's going to be at the forefront of that. And just the backfield competition has weakened considerably with Chase Edmonds gone. They gave him a nice contract. They believe in him. I think that his ability to stay healthy is worth questioning, but you could say that about virtually any running back in the league. So that's where I am on James Conner. I think he's an excellent mid-third round pick. I have him at 26, which would suggest that I have him as an early third rounder, but you can usually get him in the mid-third, and I'm willing to take him there.
Counselor Bloom, your response?
Yeah, and I will say agreed to be healthily skeptical about Benjamin, but one of the people trying to convince us about Benjamin is Cliff Kingsbury. So I'm open to that. I'm
The
open,
fake sharp.
right? I'm open to Daryl. Did you see that he let Kyler Murray call plays? By the way, that was quite a thing to behold. I wonder what's going to come of that. Just that he would even divulge that is interesting in and of itself.
Yeah.
But I wonder, and maybe I'm a little too colored here by watching Connor play for my Steelers and seeing that, yes, he will give you everything as a lead back, but he will wear down. That he I think physiologically, if you're giving him 18, 20, 22 touches a game, you're almost guaranteeing that he's going to miss time within like a month or two. And I wonder if the Cardinals understand that. They brought in Darrell Williams. They like, Benjamin. So the other thing is, and this is more of a structural positional draft strategy thing, I just like the running backs from say round 5 to round 10 so much that I'm a fan of take a running back in the first or second round and then just wait a few rounds before you take another running back. So when I'm weighing James Conner against some of these receivers we've talked about, right, Michael Pittman and Cortland Sutton, so on, like I'm just weighing them, assuming that at that point in my draft I will have one running back and I will like my running back 2 prospects later on down the road. So it's more of a positional structural thing than anything about Conner himself.
I think that we agree here from a strategic standpoint, because it sounds like we both like the anchor RB, the one stud RB up top. Take, a bunch of stud receivers, maybe mix in a stud tight end, maybe, if you want to, get a little crazy and take a quarterback in there. But, this is also a debate that could be settled just based on games played, which, that's not fun for anybody because, who's truly good at projecting games played. But I could go either way on James Conner. It's just from day to day, like, am I going to take him, where in the location where he's going to go? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
I'm going to give that one to Sig, and I know Evan agreed with his point. I'm going to give it to Sig just from the structural point. In other words, middle round 3, I'm taking wide receiver or I'm taking tight end there so much that I'm rarely ending up with Conner. I do think the Conner micro stuff is interesting, though, and I think he'll fly a bit under the radar in DFS, too, which is something I'll have my eye on as well, just because people aren't that overly excited about him. But we'll talk about that more when the season gets here. Let's go to, let's go to Zack Gertz while we're talking about Arizona. Sigmund is way higher on Zack Gertz than Silva. Sigmund has 76th overall, Evan 119th overall. Zack Gertz is such an interesting case this year. I've seen people be so high on him. Oh, without DeAndre Hopkins, he's going to catch 10 balls a game just like he did last year. I've seen people be really low on them. He's old. The Eagles gave up on him in the playoffs. Ertz flopped. So I've seen wildly different opinions on Zack Ertz all year. Sig, I'll let you go first here on this very aggressive Zack Ertz ranking of 76th overall.
And I think it really is tied into Hopkins' suspension and the idea that the Cardinals' defense, cornerbacks at least, are going to be a problem. They're really going to have to try to win track meet type scores. Arizona KC week 1 could be some interesting TV for sure. I would expect that Kyler Murray is going to rely on Zack Ertz a lot in those first 6 weeks before DeAndre Hopkins is back. We'll see about Marquise Brown, what kind of role he plays in the passing game. Again, you don't have Chase Edmonds, that short-term target. Maybe this is a good out for James Conner to remain a strong running back 1 because we expect this. But the team recommitted to Ertz. I don't see any reason to expect a decline. And what I like about Ertz is, let's say Ertz is a top 6 tight end for the first 6 weeks, and then we just don't know after DeAndre Hopkins gets back. But you will already have been able to keep pace with the teams that took early tight ends for those first 6 weeks. And then you'll have 6 weeks to improve your team elsewhere because we're all good fantasy players, right? So I like it. I think that if we were just rating Ertz on the first 6 weeks, he would definitely be higher. And maybe we shouldn't think that much farther than that. But I'm going to say the exact opposite thing if you ask me about DeAndre Hopkins.
Interesting. Evan, go ahead.
Well, I guess Jimmy Kemsky, who covers the Eagles, and by the way, needs to do exactly what Nick Underhill did and get filthy rich betting on himself, covering the Eagles for an independent site. And I've been on his ass about this for years. Yeah. But he, because he's like one of those guys that like he has this like cult base following, and just people just absolutely love him because he's hilarious. I mean, he's
great graphic design too. Graphic design.
Oh my
genius.
God. No, he's hilarious. But I guess he was reading the top 150, and he was like, he pointed out that I said low ceiling catch and fall tight end could lose snaps to motherfucking Mackey Award winner Trey McBride. And he goes, I used to call him No Yak Zach, and then I was like, well, yeah, where do you think I got that? It was because you called him that. Zack Gertz is getting old. He doesn't add anything. But I mean, look, if he gobbles up targets like he did late last season, I'm going to be wrong, period. It's just that, they did replace DeAndre theoretically with Marquise Brown. DeAndre is going to be coming back. And they drafted Trey McBride in the second round. So he's just a guy that I gravitate away from. Zack Ertz, an old tight end with a lot of target competition. But look, if he does get back to where he was late last season, because I mean he was a machine in terms of commanding targets, then that's how I'm going to be wrong.
Yeah, this is a tough one, man. I have not had a strong take on Zack Gertz all year. I think Sig's points about just raw volume at the tight end position is a good one, especially if you're in full PPR formats and our ability to move on after 6 weeks and maybe sell high before DeAndre Hopkins gets back. But man, this is close. I honestly have not taken a lot of Zack Gertz at all. Let's go to the Bills backfield. Devin Singletary, Sigmund has 70th overall, I think way above market. Evan Moore, I think in line with market, around 110 overall. Sig, I'll let you go first here on being very high on Devin Singletary, the artist formerly known as Devin Singletubby. But go ahead on Devin Singletary.
Sorry, I got to compose myself now. Going into the summer, Singletary seemed like a slam dunk, a layup, because he was the clear lead back, performed up to expectations, and the team James Cook doesn't really affect Devin Singletary's role as an early down back or the primary back. But we have a new story here as Zach Moss is back from the dead, and he may even have something like the role he had as a rookie going into the season when we thought of this as a split backfield. But since then, this has become a much better offense, a much more prolific offense. And Singletary is still the only one out of these three backs. It is a three-headed backfield, and that's ugly for fantasy. But Singletary is the only one that we know for sure can stay healthy, hold up under 20 touches a game, and he fits. So I think this is one of those ones where you take him, maybe you start him and wish you hadn't against the Rams. I don't know. You might have to have patience, but we're sure that Zach Moss can stay healthy. Are we sure that James Cook is going to do more than specific role plays for a rookie? I still think that until proven otherwise, Devin Singletary is the lead back here.
Okay, Evan, you are 40 spots lower than Sig on Devin Singletary. Go ahead on him.
Yeah, and I'm also way higher, I'm sure, on James Cook. Because, I know like at one point I was like 30 spots above ADP on James Cook. So that's what it comes down to. That's what it boils down to, is that I think the way that James Cook moves is different than any other back in the Buffalo running back room. And I understand. I think that Singletary will enter the season as the primary early down back. But the way that he became a significant fantasy contributor last year was they just like almost entirely phased out Zach Moss, and they just pretty much gave everything to Singletary. And I mean, that worked out well in fantasy. I would say it maybe even worked out well in real life. I mean, they're scoring a shitload of points, right? But I think that James Cook really takes away any hope of Devin Singletary being a factor in the receiving game. And this is a pass-first team. And James Cook, I think, has an abundance of upside that I think that Singletary doesn't. With that said, again, I think that September is going to belong to Singletary on the early downs, and it's going to be, a week by week. And they're willing to tweak stuff, as we've seen. Like they will tweak stuff on the fly. And I guess my bet is that they are going to tweak stuff in favor of James Cook and away from Singletary.
I thought Buffalo told us their intentions this year. They tried to get J.D. McKissick, very solidly tried to get J.D. McKissick. He ends up backing out and going back to the football team. And then they use a round 2 pick on James Cook. So to me, they're telling us they don't love Devin Singletary. So that scares me a bit in fantasy. I'll go ahead and give that one to Evan. Couple more here. Big gap between you guys on TJ Hawkinson. Sigmund, TJ Hawkinson, 68th overall. Evan, 101st overall on TJ Hawkinson. Evan, I'm sure people are going to be surprised. TJ Hawkinson is indeed an Evan Mackey Award winner, and we know that the
He won the
Lions,
Mackey.
our Lions, are going to be much better.
He won
on
the
offense.
Mackey over teammate Noah Fant.
Yes. So go ahead on your 101 ranking of TJ Hawkinson.
I thought I was ranking him somewhat conservatively, clearly very conservatively. God, I went on JJ's show like about a week and a half ago, and he opened with this anti-TJ Hawkinson rant. I was worried that TJ Hawkinson's mom might listen to it and just like disown her child. I mean, he just destroyed TJ Hawkinson, and I'm not like, anti-TJ Hawkinson like that. I mean, it sounded like JJ thinks he's on the DND list. But I like the complexion of the Lions passing offense right now. I think that it is it could be underrated, but now all of a sudden there's like a lot of dudes to get the ball to. DeAndre Swift is going to get a lot of targets. Jamal Williams is going to continue to play a lot. Amon-Ra St. Brown had double-digit targets in the final 6 games to close out last season, plays in sort of the same area of the field as TJ Hawkinson. DJ Chark, I think, was a pickup that, he's going to make a little bit of a difference on the perimeter. And Jamison Williams, that dude is a game breaker. Whenever he gets on the field, he's going to be a big-time factor. And Josh Reynolds is also back. So I don't know. I don't like saying negative things about the Mackey Award winners. I truly don't. And I thought that I was being a little bit responsible with this ranking. But I don't know. Just Sig, take it away.
This is a very aggressive Hawkinson ranking. Sig, go ahead.
Yeah.
And I think it more reflects, and the Ertz ranking does too, because you're referencing my overall rankings, right? Because I think that probably within the position, there's not that much variance, a couple of spots. But I'm looking at the tight end position this year, and I'm thinking if you don't get one of the top 5, and we could talk about, step through each one of them and the attractiveness of them, you better get one of the next 5. Knox, Schultz, in any particular order, Ertz, Goddard, and then Hawkinson. And I think that Evan led with something that we should just have our minds open to. The Lions offense is going to be good.
Of course it is.
It's going to be a good offense. It's going to create fantasy overachievers. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown at ADP. I'm not talking people out of DeAndre Swift at ADP, even though I might not be that aggressive on him. I love DJ Chark. Did we forget that DJ Chark was good before he was on our Urban Meyer team, So maybe this all just leads back to, like, in your 2 quarterback superflex leagues, just punt quarterback 2 and wait for Jared Goff. Maybe that's what this spells out if you take the first letter of each sentence. But I just think it's an efficiency play on Hawkinson, who is a player that was considered an elite 2-way talent at tight end and is going into his 4th year now. So it would make sense that he's going to get better. Now, there's this frustrating thing with Hawkinson, which never seems to come together with him, whether it's injuries or the quality of the team around him or whatever. So maybe we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but he could easily be one of those players where the target go down, the target share goes down, but the target quality goes up. And he finally shows why they took him in the top 10.
Yeah, my take here is that the targets going down can't be construed as something good for TJ Hawkinson. And I do think that Amon-Ra and Swift and Chark all being there and all being healthy is going to be a lot for TJ Hawkinson to overcome. So I'll go ahead and give that one to Evan. A couple more.
Let me ask you this, Sig, though.
Yeah.
Before we move on, Dallas Goddard or Hawkinson?
I keep getting this nagging feeling that we're going to see a month into the season that Goddard and Kittle are kind of the same guy, right? Like, they're going to be weeks where they get 2 for 17, and they're going to be weeks they get 4 for 115, 2 touchdowns. So, this is one of those things too, and this is what's good about debating. Again, it's good about getting into the arena, because I think that out of those 5 tight ends we talked about, Goddard is the one that if somebody said, here's my draft plan at tight end, I'm going to take Dallas Goddard around before ADP. I'm not going to say you're crazy. That's never going to work. I understand having a conviction about him. And I think that, again, if there's a lesson here, it is, I don't want to be, unlike the most years, you're not going to be in a pack of people who are all taking 0s and 3s and 2s at tight end. Most people are going to have at least a viable fantasy tight end this year. You have less competition on the waiver wire, but I'm looking at after the top 10 guys, and it's Cole Kmet. It's bleak. It's bleak. So I just think of that second 5, if you're not going to go tight end early, whether it's Goddard, any of those guys, have your target in mind. And I have all 5 of them, I think, higher than a lot of people that in the consensus overall ranking, just because of that feeling I have of you should get one of those top 10 tight ends.
Okay. Let's go to Brandon Iuke. Reportedly having a big camp, for what that's worth. Brandon Iuke, formerly in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse, doesn't seem like it anymore. Sigmund 79th overall, Evan 120th overall. I've seen all kinds of opinions on Brandon Iuke as his his ADP has kind of skyrocketed. I've moved to kind of being out on him. So I'm curious here on Sig sticking with Brandon Ayuk, even as ADP has soared. I think 79 overall is still ahead of market on him.
Yeah, this is tough, man. San Francisco's pass offense is tough. And maybe, again, the answer here is Trey Lance. Just make sure you take Trey Lance, right? Because now you have Danny Gray in the mix. And Danny Gray could take away some deep targets from Ayuk, because I think that's where Ayuk was going to shine in this offense. Is that you're pulling everybody into the box. You're confounding them with 11-on-11 football with Trey Lance. I mean, how many times you guys remember when Robert Griffin III was the quarterback for a Kyle Shanahan offense? It was Aldrick Robinson, right?
Aldrick Robinson.
Always running free deep. I mean, and now maybe I thought it was going to be Brandon Ayuk. Maybe it's going to be Danny Gray some of the time too. But I think that my ranking on Ayuk basically represents when there's this much positive buzz about a player. We think of all these structural reasons why they can't outperform ADP, but oftentimes that's the lead-in chapter to that true breakout season. Now, what you do with that, you fade Deebo Samuel or you fade, I don't know. And I project every player on every team. So these are hard questions to grapple with when you have to commit to one data point. I just know that the buzz around Brandon Ayuk, the level of it and the consistency of it often precedes a breakout year where the player exceeds all expectations.
Evan, retort on Brandon Ayuk.
The steady drumbeat has been there for Brandon Ayuk, no question. And when you map it out, like tactically, I think that the way that Trey Lance plays, and I mean, I think that they're going to be more of a vertical passing team transitioning from Jimmy G to Trey Lance, and that would suit Brandon Ayuk. If you look at all the receivers that they have, the longest ADOT receiver is Brandon Ayuk, and he can absolutely make plays downfield. And we saw, he started really slow last year for a variety of reasons. He was clearly in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse, playing behind freaking Trent Sherfield to begin last year. But I think he got a little humbled. And I mean, he's always been an awesome talent. I mean, at Arizona State, in his final year at Arizona State, he led the nation in yards after catch per reception, which is, a staple metric for the Kyle Shanahan offense. That's probably why they prioritized him in the draft, is because of how good he was after the catch. So you combine his long ADOT with the replacement of Jimmy G and moving on to Trey Lance and becoming more of a vertical passing attack, you can absolutely build a case for Brandon Ayuk. And I've thought many times about moving him up, and I haven't been able to bring myself to do it because I just think he's going to be wildly inconsistent. And he's not going to be heavily targeted because there just aren't going to be many targets in the San Fran offense. But he's going to be a guy that I'm going to be playing in DFS this year, though.
My take here is pretty simple, that Deebo Samuel is being massively overdrafted, and the gap between Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk should be much closer. I'm just not that interested really in either of them. I am interested in Trey Lance. I mean, where they go. I was taking Brandon Ayuk when he was going really, really late. But yeah, I just think it's not crazy at all for me to think that Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel will finish the year close in scoring this year. I'll go with Evan there. Last one, Melvin Gordon. The talk of fantasy for much of the summer has been what to do with Javonte Williams. This is going to flow through to all the Melvin Gordon stuff as well. Sigmund is way lower than Evan on Melvin Gordon. Sigmund 114th overall, Evan 79th overall on Melvin Gordon. Sigmund, I'll get your Denver backfield take here first. It wouldn't be a fantasy football debate show unless people were screaming their faces off about Javonte Williams going in the second round and whether that's warranted or not.
Yeah, this is tough because if it breaks down the way it did last year, then this is one of those situations. And I like the way you frame that, Adam. Like, think about two players on the same team at the same position and whether their ADP really gap reflects the actual gap based on how the teams are going to use them, et cetera. And if it's anything like last year, then this is absurd. Now, we do have Melvin Gordon, a la Adrian Peterson a few years back, saying they want him to be the guy. But then he said, but they're going to rotate. I get a series, he gets a series. So I just think that this is one of those situations where Melvin Gordon could have flex value. Melvin Gordon obviously has Javonte Williams injury upside. That alone justifies where he's going. As the season goes on, though, if Javonte Williams, and this is the whole Javonte Williams referendum, right? Is he up to being the guy? If he is, then Gordon starts to fade. And at some point, if you're not dropping him, you're probably just having him as like injury bye-week insurance, waiting to see if Javonte Williams gets hurt. Now, I'm going to do a little bit like what Evan did and say there's a good case for Gordon, just in so much as he looked about as good as he had in his career last year.
Yep.
He actually looked good last year. But again, that makes you wonder, why did they wait so long to bring him back? Why wasn't the market more interested in him? I have no idea. So this one makes me scratch my head. It's another one also where in that part of my draft, draft, I'm swinging for the fences at running back. I'm looking at even if it's somebody like Dameon Pierce, Nyheim Hines, even some players I think that have more of an arrow pointing up, where I see Gord's arrow pointing down.
Evan, go ahead on Melvin Gordon.
Dameon Pierce, RB23 right now. So I'm with you on that. I mean, Dameon Pierce is like a priority draft for me right now, priority draft pick. Melvin Gordon, and I probably have him too high. I mean, 79 is probably too high. Somewhere closer to 100, I think, is probably, I don't know. I'll go look back at it today.
Capitulation. Get the capitulation sticker out.
I may be capitulating here. But it's also funny how, like, well, I don't know if you've experienced, you probably actually go out and touch grass, unlike many of us here, Sig, but there's like a low-key war in the Slack chat rooms between, can I get Cecil Lammy's take on Javonte Williams versus Melvin Gordon, or can I get Benjamin Albright's take?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Denver
like,
media
I'm telling
for you. So
I don't know.
Since you brought up Cecil's name, I want to say, so Cecil is really excellent at saying something without saying it, which I think is about the access game. It's about a lot of things. Sure. But he would just really, in a way to draw attention to it, not draw attention to it, indicate that maybe Melvin Gordon could eventually get traded. Maybe Melvin Gordon at some point isn't even on the team this year. Now, I'm not saying. Yeah.
No, there was a show that you did about the Saints. Mm-hmm. And Cecil was like, "Don't be, if Melvin Gordon gets cut, he can land with the Saints." Yeah. So, I don't know. I always revert back to, it's a new coaching staff. We really don't know what's going on here. Melvin Gordon was good last year. They did brought him back. God, he came back so cheaply. I think it was $2.5 million, 1 year, $2.5 million. And I think most of it is guaranteed, but still that was a very weak market. I don't know. Melvin Gordon is a guy who in the 10th round, and I shouldn't be even saying this because I have him at freaking 79th overall right now, but in the 10th round, if he's there, I really like to take him as my RB5.
So to me, the upside case for Melvin Gordon is Javonte Williams gets hurt. Beyond that, Melvin Gordon is never getting more than 50% of the touches. Whereas you can see Javonte's role growing to 55, 60, 65, 70. You can't see Melvin Gordon ever getting that. So really the only time you're excited to start Melvin Gordon, in my opinion, is if Javonte gets hurt. And I will not be betting on that. So Evan already capitulated. So obviously that one went to Sig. There's no doubt about that. All right.
Where's the loyalty, Levitan?
This was a fun episode. I do agree with Sig that it is good to understand both sides of every argument for sure. The only argument that I can't hear the other side of anymore is that Christian McCaffrey is going to get hurt with 100% certainty. That's the only other side of the argument that I can't face anymore. All other arguments, I'm happy to hear the other side of. Sigmund, thanks so much for being here. Tell the people where they can find you, where they can find your work.
Yeah, I always look forward to it. And for fantasy football creators out there, debate is a good format. All right. So the more of this, football guys, whatever. If you don't know about football guys, we're obsessed. We're not touching much grass. We're seeing grass on our screens. It's great though, guys. And as I said, Adam, before we went on the air, every year, every day we get to do this, I feel like we're getting away with something, and it's fun for us all to get away with it together.
Exactly. Appreciate it. Okay. Thanks so much to everyone for being here and checking out this debate episode. We'll be back with Market Monday and all the rest of the pods for the week. For Sigmund, for Evan, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.